This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Bulls fans, you know we just don't talk ball, we live it. And now we're throwing you a full court lob with $15 tickets to select March games. Don't just hear us break it down. Be there. Feel the energy, lose your voice, and howl with us. Use code KFAN at timberwolves.com/March to get your $15 tickets. Code KFAN.
Well, that was interesting phrasing during that iHeart Sports Update regarding the end of the dream that might have realized Aaron Rodgers as the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. Again, it was specific to the door isn't completely shut. Now, that gets back to, I think, the language that .com Tom might have used as well. On the other hand, I think if you end up spending a decent amount of money on a backup quarterback, I don't know if you'd still have the option of doing something later. But for now, at the very least, it appears the Vikings are moving on. And the question, really, I guess a lot of it has to do with McCarthy and how he proceeds. Questions will be shut down much more easily and much more quickly if he becomes the star of training camp. And obviously, if he starts the regular season and does very well as well. So stay tuned on that. Interesting text came in from Jeremy in Edina. On the subject of Norwegian sports oddities, I just returned from Lillehammer and the 33-mile Birken ski race, where you are required to carry 7.7 pounds in a backpack in recognition of the warriors who skied the baby Prince Haakon, am I pronouncing that right, Haakon, to safety centuries ago. The race has scales on site, and officials who do spot checks, hold on, bear with me, of your backpack, wait, but mostly it leaves the skiers to the honor system. It's hard to tell if there were cheaters out there. They did a good job of making their backpacks look crammed full. That's fascinating to me. They may have to reconsider the honor system on the basis of this particular scandal. Maybe the Norwegians can no longer be trusted in that regard. 7.7 pounds in the backpack. Wow. That's that I would not particularly find that inviting. Hendo says you read in the story how the scandal saw the light of day, a hidden camera showing the coaches altering the uniforms. But that still doesn't eliminate my question. Why was there a hidden camera? One would presume, unless it's the idea of, word to the wise, when you're getting dressed, we got hidden cameras everywhere. I would think that would be illegal. I'm not sure, but that still begs the same question. Something created the suspicion, apparently, to where there was a hidden camera. Where does that come from? Or is it routine that, all right, maybe this is all out in the open and we got cameras everywhere and somebody saw something there that looked a little bit fishy? I don't know. Is that enough? Maybe there is a specific story that gives more detail on this. I have been unable to find it. I have not located it quite yet. College basketball men's tournaments started last night. As many of you know, you could have heard it on I think eventually the flagship last night. I think we started it on the Plus. And the first game, the first so-called, I still call it the play-in game, matched Alabama State and St. Francis. And it was a hell of a game, by the way. I don't know how many of you got to see it. And I was fascinated by the finish because the finish it basically reminded me of a Hail Mary sort of situation, right? Because in effect, so there's 2.7 seconds to go, right? The score is tied at 68. Alabama State is inbounding under the opposing team basket. So they have to go the length of the floor. And with 2.7 seconds, that doesn't leave much. So they decide, in this case, I think it was a guard named Micah Simpson, throws, in effect, a Hail Mary pass, which, if you're doing it right in football, how's it supposed to go? Well, you just get the ball in the vicinity of the goal line, and then you hope either to somehow, if you're the offense, come down with it, or in the scrum where various people are touching it and tipping it, there's another offensive player kind of behind who's able to come up with the ball and waltz into the end zone. Precisely what happened to the Chicago Bears against Washington this year, in one of the most infamous plays of the 2024 season. So it almost played out the same way here, where in the scrum, several people went up for the ball, got a hand on it here or there, and it wasn't a deliberate tap to a teammate, but the ball does end up in the hands of a guard named Amar Knox. And he says, hey, I can lay it in. And he didn't blink. He did it. He hit the layup, and that ends up winning the ball game. I guess I'm surprised. When I thought about it, I said, too often I do think teams have tended to shy away from that play because there's so much uncertainty and there's a likelihood that the ball's going to get stolen or it's going to get tapped the wrong direction. You don't have much of a chance. But I have to believe it's still your best chance to win the game, right? Because what some teams end up doing is, well, you know what? It's not a great opportunity, but we'll live with a half-court shot. We'll inbound it, take a couple of dribbles, and let the ball go. Analytically, that can't be as good a chance to win the game, I don't think. Can it? Realistically, I think your best chance is to do exactly what they did in this case. It's not always going to work out that way because we've seen passes get knocked down, as in football, in the wrong direction. But it was basically Hail Mary in a basketball sense, which I found fairly interesting. And I don't know how, maybe that pass is thrown more often than I think, but I feel like some coaches, they go, no, that's too risky. We'll just, if we're lucky, we get a pass to midcourt, and then we just let loose with a shot from there. I don't know. Maybe there's an analyst, there's an analytic that explains what you're better in that situation. What is your best chance mathematically to win the game? Is it what they did, or is that highly unusual and it doesn't prove anything other than in this case it worked? Or is it still a better chance to, as I said, get the ball to around the half court line, maybe a little bit beyond there, and just take a long prayer of a shot? But it worked out very well, and it was a great way to start the tournament. The other thing worth mentioning yesterday is, of course, North Carolina destroyed Brian Dutcher's club. It wasn't a game from literally the first 5 minutes. And obviously North Carolina, the team that won, has been under siege for even getting into the tournament. And now Heels fans are going after any media jackal, who either A, said Aaron Rodgers might end up with the Vikings, or B, that North Carolina didn't deserve to be in the tournament. And they're saying, what do you think of the Heels now? People can't be that stupid, can they? They can't be that moronic that winning one play-in game against another low-seed team proves that you are worthy of the tournament? How many times? No, not in the least. Now, I will grant, if they get to the Final Four, they probably have a pretty good case, right? But the idea that this happens all the time, like we get into this nonsense with bowl games that, well, you saw that Big Ten, they shouldn't have had an extra team in there. It's like, well, no, the system worked to the way it's supposed to. I mean, Indiana's a good example. Indiana deserved to be in the tournament. They didn't do much with it, but they deserved to be in the tournament. So the idea that we base the credibility of a team only on the basis of the outcome makes no sense. That doesn't prove. We don't know, for example, that another team, West Virginia, might not have done the same thing to San Diego State Well, I think it was San Diego State that they were playing. So for those, it's just so simplistic to say. And conversely, I would say, I'm not sure it's fair that if Carolina had gotten blown out, they say, see, they didn't belong. It really shouldn't be about the result in the game that follows the decision. It should be more about the decision itself. Is it solid? Is it fundamentally sound? And I frankly do not think it is. There's another college basketball story I do want to try to get to before we prepare for our 4:30 guest. That is Gerald Posner with his reaction to some more alleged JFK files being released. And we've got Kessler in studio. That is scheduled for 5:30 as well. 64686 is how you reach us. That is the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text app.
Join the Minnesota Wild for Mental Health Awareness Night tonight. The XL Energy Center, get your special ticket pack for an unforgettable game against Seattle, a pregame event with speaker Mark Wick, and a support a great cause. A portion of each ticket sold goes to the Ranch Teammates for Life nonprofit. Don't miss out and make a difference and cheer on the Wild. Full details, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
This is a very, important time of the year when it comes to for college basketball fans for all the obvious reasons. It's the start of the big dance. 2 more play-in games tonight, and then the series or the tournament starts in earnest tomorrow. I think there's 16 games tomorrow each day early. And by the way, a lot of those games will be on at least one of our flagship stations. I think on Thursday, that's tomorrow. We're out at 6 anyway because the Gopher women are playing their consolation tournament game, and that means contractually we move over from the usual KFAN Plus spot, the men's tournament, to KFAN starting at 6. So that's what Guardsy explained to me on Thursday's show. So it's an exciting time of the year. A lot of people are talking about the history. They're ranking the greatest shots in big dance history. They're even encouraged by what took place in that first play-in game yesterday. Not so much the second game, which was pretty much, as we mentioned last segment, a blowout from the beginning. So it's a wonderful time of year, especially if you're into brackets and bracket busting and all that kind of good stuff. The shadow question that's not really so favorable and not quite so encouraging is whether, in a broader sense, college basketball has a growing gambling problem. And it's a question that was asked in a Wall Street Journal piece just the other day. Are we even aware of how bad this might be getting? And what do we do about it? What do we make of it? We can't be surprised because we know how big gambling, every major sport has gotten into bed with gambling in a way that historically they ran for the hills because of the concern about being too cozy, that might lead to more gambling scandals as well. They remind us that, and I guess I was unaware of this, over the past 2 seasons, at least 7 Division I teams have been implicated in unusual betting activity. Now, that's not the same thing as proving that they've thrown a game, or games, but it's really the first sign of trouble, unusual betting activity. Some of the suspicious wagers involve people connected to an ongoing federal investigation into a sprawling gambling ring that conspired with Jonte Porter, to manipulate his performance in NBA games. Authorities have been exploring the group's potential ties to college hoops as well. On the college side, it started as a weird phenomenon involving Temple University last March. And now there's a larger cloud of suspicion, more programs drawing scrutiny from sports books, integrity monitoring services, and the NCAA. They include Eastern Michigan, Mississippi Valley State, the University of New Orleans, and North Carolina A&T have all had games flagged this season. People familiar with the matter said Dragnet could expand to other schools as the federal investigation continues. One former Temple player under investigation, Heiser Miller, transferred to Virginia Tech but was removed from the team without appearing in a single game. Meanwhile, New Orleans and North Carolina A&T have both suspended players for what the schools have described as a violation of team rules. And those aren't even all the betting-related issues the NCAA has been dealing with. Fresno State and Loyola of Maryland have suspended or removed players because of separate gambling allegations that do not appear related to the larger government probe. All those schools either declined to comment or did not respond to inquiries, except for Loyola, which said that it had been made aware of an individual's gambling violation that was promptly reported to the NCAA, among other steps. What's clear is that the specter of gambling that hangs over March Madness shows no signs of dissipating anytime soon. In the case of the Temple story, they write that there's really been no resolution to what actually happened, even though it's been more than a year since the NCAA started looking into Temple. Revelations in federal court trickling out slowly, and the NCAA having largely exhausted its investigatory capabilities. You'll recall that the NCAA cannot compel potential witnesses to cooperate in most cases. And they note that, the concerns keep growing. Many of the games that have aroused suspicion follow a familiar pattern, almost exclusively featured two relatively obscure schools and involved large wagers on the first half point spread. None of those teams that we've mentioned anywhere near the tournament, but they suggest that the incidents still pose an existential threat to the NCAA because of the concern that they could threaten to undermine the legitimacy of the sport as well. And that's why they say NCAA has been fretting about exactly this kind of scenario for years. NCAA has gone to states asking for bans on so-called proposition bets, which enable bettors to wager on individual player performances. The NCAA president, Charlie Baker, has said that college athletes have told him they've been pressured by classmates or family members to manipulate their performance, including for minutia such as not taking the first shot or missing a couple of free throws. That's where I think there's the greatest danger for trouble, right? Where you go, well, this is a fairly obscure bet. I'm not asking you to throw to the game, and it's not going to feel like that if it's just make sure you don't take the first shot of the game. I mean, that's pretty hard to prove any kind of subterfuge there, but those are the kind of prop bets that have become a big part of this entire betting controversy. Baker saying, the NCAA president, it's a bad place for college sports to be, even with an integrity program that's probably one of the largest ones in the world. The one thing people love about sports, I hear it all the time, is the fact that it's something where you don't know what's going to happen necessarily, where there are constantly surprises and where you know it's a clean playing field. Those things matter to people. Now, within the gaming industry, they say, sorry, prop bets are popular. Wagers like that are popular. And if you try to eliminate those from official sanction, they're just going to go underground, and it's going to become even harder to address what they say is there's still relatively few potential scandals, that your best chance to uncover this stuff and investigate it and put a quick stop to it is if you don't make it go underground, that you make it as public as it is, which has triggered in many cases, one could argue, these investigations and suspending players and even suspending those particular bets if there's a feeling that there is too much manipulation that is being attempted or too much money is indeed being spent. A lobbyist with Princeton Public Affairs Group says, I think it will lead to more manipulation, worse outcomes, and less integrity. Just because a particular event lends itself to manipulation doesn't mean you ban it. That's in accord with the idea that you don't want to eliminate some of these bets in a very public sense. The NCAA saw 4 states restrict prop bets on individual college athletes in 2024. They are still permitted in 20 more. And again, this is all part of a larger issue we've discussed intermittently through the years that, I mean, the position of this show is not anti-betting. I don't have a problem if one of these years, one of these legislative sessions, there's a breakthrough and we get legalized sports betting here. I'm not holding my breath. It's a subject we have revisited often with Kessler. Maybe we'll get we'll let him give us a status report in that regard today when he joins in studio at 5:30. But I think what we've also tried to say is if you have strong feelings that you can't get in the way of people, doing this legally, that there are ramifications to it. And there are things that should be concerning to people. We should go into it not defensive, but with our eyes open. And I don't think anybody in their right mind could say with a straight face that with the reversal from, betting outfits and pro sports leagues and college, the whole bit, going from we're getting as far away from each other as we can to we want to get closer and closer and closer. We, in fact, want to get so close that we want you, when we can, in our arenas. And there are places where that's indeed the case, that it's not logical to think that one of the ramifications of getting into bed to this degree is that you may have more of these scandals, and there may be some going on right now. I'm sure there's some going on right now that have not yet even been uncovered. And there's billions of dollars at stake. So we know that the genie's out of the bottle. It ain't going to go backwards at this point, at least not nationally speaking, but I think it's definitely part of the story. And there were interesting items here. And even though there are no, big dance teams involved in this, it's all part of the same sport. And it is not a very pleasant sensation to think that this kind of stuff might indeed be going on and might be more likely to go on in the future. Let's make this the bottom of the hour pause. Let's talk JFK assassination files. There's some new ones released. Is there anything of substance here? I know our next guest, he is, for me, the number one authority on this subject. We've had him on literally for decades. And the fact that we get him on today when he's very much in demand is very much appreciated. Gerald Posner is scheduled next here on The Fan.
The ultimate day of heavy metal is coming to Somerset Amphitheater. Don't miss out on Summer Aloud 2025, July 11th, with performances by Parkway Drive, I Prevail, Beartooth, and more. And now through the 23rd, you can use the Shamrock St. Patrick's Day deal to secure 4 tickets for just $99 plus fees. Get all the details, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
At the risk of opening all of us up and this show up to God knows what kind of controversy, I will invite folks to hit the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line 64686 if they have a question or observation for our next guest, Gerald Posner, whose name for our audience I think needs no introduction at this point. We appreciate the fact that he's willing to join us on a day where I know he's under heavy demand, JFK assassination files related. Gerald, can I start with a joke that you might have, I'm guessing if anybody's heard every assassination conspiracy joke in the world, it probably is you. But I got a kick out of this one. I want to run it by you, whether you've heard it or not. As the joke goes, a JFK conspiracy theorist dies and arrives in heaven, where God is there to receive him. Welcome, God said. You are allowed to ask me one question, and I will answer honestly. Without hesitating, the conspiracy theorist asks, who really shot Kennedy? God replies, Lee Harvey Oswald shot him from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. There were no accomplices. He acted alone. To which the conspiracy theorist pauses, thinks for a moment, and says, bleep, this goes higher up than I thought.
Yeah, it's fabulous. It's one.
Well played.
You're right. Yeah, it is one of those that still makes me laugh.
Yes.
And I do like it because that's exactly the response that I think you would get, even if that happened in heavenly life.
100%. Yes, indeed. And it captures this phenomenon to such a tremendous degree that you know very, very well. How do you decide? Last night, you allowed yourself a brief rant because of an individual, and I don't know who this person is, who basically suggested that, whenever you're looking for people to respond to the latest files being out, pay no attention to what Gerald Posner has to say. Is he a CIA media asset? His research is lacking on JFK. From the evidence, it seems likely. I'm sure you get one of these, well, probably every single day. And you have to make a decision. Do I elevate it to the point of responding? Do I let it go? Am I better off just letting it go? My assumption is every once in a while you feel like you sort of have to weigh in, and you did that again yesterday. How do you make that calculation?
You don't, because normally the calculation always is, since the time the book was published in 1993, and I remember in San Francisco, somebody sat next to my wife, Tricia, and said, "How does it feel to work for the FBI?" They asked her, and she said, "What?" She said, "Don't you and your husband work for the FBI, with this book that concludes that Oswald did it?" That was the first time we were introduced to it. And then over the years, it's sort of a steady drumbeat, and I generally, you're right, try to always ignore it. Then sometimes at the end of a long day, when you're doing 100 different things, yes, and you're a little bit more irritated than normal, and you haven't had the full complement of sleep, and then you see it and you tend to get a little bit more aggravated with it, and you forget the first rule of Twitter is always take a breath, then go have a cup of coffee, then come back and see if you still feel like answering it. But, in that case, I felt like answering it and just saying, and sometimes I just get tired of it, but, it's still not going to stop it.
Well, and, again, I think you and I have had so many talks about this over the years. I don't think you're offended necessarily by people, reporters, even non-reporters who come to a different conclusion or question some aspects of, the Lee Harvey Oswald did it approach. But the idea that it's beyond that. It has to be elevated to, I'm not just going to disagree with you, and here's why. I'm going to dismiss whatever you've said on the basis of the fact that you're a CIA asset or you're a boogeyman of some sort. That it always has to be taken, I feel, or often taken to that next step in their dismissal, which I think further erodes whatever credibility that individual might represent.
Right. So, but Dan, the thing that was so astonishing about the entire thing, to at least me, with the Kennedy assassination, is I've written books, as you know, on money in the Vatican, on Nazi war criminals, on 9/11. I've written articles on terrorism and Islamic terrorism in Saudi Arabia. I did a book on that got me banned from the kingdom. The only book that I ever had to actually open up a police file because we were getting threats. We had dead fish sent to us, had a rat's tail sent in the mail, got accosted on the street, was the JFK assassination. And when I concluded that Oswald alone had killed Kennedy in this book, I did not expect that reaction. Now, I understand it. I don't appreciate it, but I understand it, because if you really truly believe in your heart and soul that the deep state killed Kennedy, that somehow the CIA and others were involved, then Oliver Stone comes out with this film JFK that sort of rattles the cages, and even though none of it is right, it gets everybody focused on the case again, gets Congress to pass a law that says open up the files. And then comes this guy, me, a couple of years later with a book that says Oswald did it. I've never studied the assassination in terms of these researchers who have been in it all their life. And it gets embraced by the mainstream press, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Everybody loves it. It's up for finalists for the Pulitzer. It's a national bestseller. You have to think that's part of the continuing cover-up and conspiracy. So Stone comes out, starts to push the needle toward the truth, and then they pick this guy, Posner, who comes up and writes the book, and all of the mainstream organizations and press who have never really investigated the case anyway say, oh, yeah, that's the right conclusion. He did a great job, because that's the continuing cover-up. Well, life should be so organized, but never did I expect that to be the argument. But I now understand it in a perverted way.
Well, and to your point, like you said, the other books, several of the other books you've written, you're not afraid of conspiracies. You're not someone who denies that they ever exist, right? You've written about some of them. You've raised questions. You've never been shy about challenging official government, reporting on a given story, whatever the case may be. But again, if you live in the world that individual, who I'm not even going to quote from yesterday, lives, that's too inconvenient. Those facts are too inconvenient, so you ignore them, so that you feel like you're holding on to your credibility, as opposed to, well, no, this is the same guy who has challenged several other conspiracies, has rattled cages publicly, or I should say, within the government, etc.
But it's very interesting because although, yes, and I talk all the time about real government conspiracies that we've seen over time, from Watergate to Iran-Contra to the lies that led us into with weapons of mass destruction to Iraq. And I know that the government can plot against our best interests, and I've said that I think that there were conspiracies brewing against Jack Kennedy in the early 60s. I just think that Oswald got there before any of those conspiracies managed to kill Kennedy. But once you conclude, and I found this out, that Oswald alone killed Kennedy, people just assume that you really don't believe in conspiracies at all. Right. And when I did a book called Why America Slept in 2003 that excoriated the CIA and the FBI for having failed to prevent 9/11, and I have a chapter at the end about three Saudi royal princes and the head of Pakistan's Air Force who meet these accidental deaths after the CIA learns about a possible Saudi role. And I thought that was a big explosive book. I had people who are 9/11 truthers who think it's the government who brought down the towers who said, well, of course, here's the guy who thinks it's Oswald alone, who's now telling us it's 19 hijackers on a group of planes. No wonder he's still telling the same story. So, I'm never going to be able to find a conspiracy big enough. When I wrote about the King assassination, I thought it was a big deal that I thought that James Earl Ray was sponsored by a group of racists and might have been, after a $50,000 bounty on King's head, that there was a small kitchen conspiracy. But that's not the type of conspiracy people are looking for in assassinations. They're looking for, J. Edgar Hoover behind a fence shooting a king or something like that.
All right, so give us your best overview on, for people who aren't paying attention to these latest files that have been released, whether you've had enough time to get your arms around what exactly has been released. It seems like we go through this with you every other month, and a lot of times it ends up being, what's promised is not as great as what ends up being delivered. So tell us about these files.
Yeah, so I'm through about 22,000 pages, thereabouts. I haven't finished all 80,000. I'm a pretty fast reader, but I haven't been to the whole thing. What I am surprised at is how many times as I'm reading through this, there are these little historical, there are nuggets in here and there about understanding the time, the Cold War, what the CIA thinks and how it really does operate in that. Nothing that's going to change people's minds about the assassination. It really puzzles me as I go through these documents why they've been held back for all these years. It's the same thing we've talked about before at different times. They've hidden some name of a former asset. They've held back on a place that is now described as a CIA station that changed in Europe. Time and time again, I keep thinking to myself that these bureaucrats who held these back for all these years and fought to keep them secret did themselves a great discredit and did the American people a great discredit, because these files are interesting, but there's nothing in here yet that's earth-shaking. I see a lot of headlines out there. I've seen the Daily Mail and, headlines in the New York Post and other places that say, CIA agent said his agency was involved shortly after the assassination. It's an old story that's made the round for years. There are a number of old stories that get picked up in these files again, and they get refurbished for another go-round. But there's nothing yet as significant news that anybody who's serious about the assassination says, wow, that's changing my mind.
You've also written that you're a little bit bothered by the belief that there were, in some cases, Social Security numbers unnecessarily exposed. What is this all about?
I don't understand this one completely. Inside the JFK files are Social Security numbers of the people who worked on the House Select Committee on Assassinations back in the late 70s. Some of them are still alive, like Bob Blakey, who was the chief counsel, and others. Those Social Security numbers were there because they were provided as all of the files of the House Select Committee went over to the Assassination Review Board and then on to the National Archives. They've always been redacted. And I was one of those who said, let's get the JFK files out for years. But obviously, we're not going to release the Social Security numbers of living people. It's an ID thief's, dream. It's like hitting the lottery or that. They did that here. Now, they still have material redacted in the files that were released yesterday. Most of it appears to relate to Martin Luther King, so that's not yet out. Why they didn't redact the Social Security numbers, I have no idea. I know that some people believe that it was deliberate by the administration because they don't like the people on the House Select Committee. I'm not looking at the politics of that. I have no idea if that's true or not, but I just view it as a fundamental mistake. It's a self-inflicted wound by the administration to let these Social Security numbers out.
I want to get your reaction to a comment from a guy, I think you know him, Michael Shermer, publisher of Skeptic Magazine.
Yep.
He sent this out recently, or since this dump, regarding the files showing that the CIA and FBI had more information on Oswald than previously admitted, suggests that they should have known he would attempt to kill JFK. Shermer writes, no. Lots of people have murderous thoughts, but most don't act on them, so predicting who is next is impossible. Why can't we predict who the next school shooter will be or the next terrorist? We never will. Minority Report notwithstanding, he writes. It's a signal detection problem. Tighten up the search criteria to catch all potential killers, and you're going to end up with far too many false positives, wrongly accused, and we will tolerate in a free society. Blackstone's ratio, it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than that one innocent suffer. Do you agree with his observations there?
I like Michael Shermer a lot. He's a good critical thinker. The reason I disagree with him on this is because I think that Oswald was a bit different. Now, look, obviously, I have the benefit of saying this Monday morning. I'm looking back at the game on Sunday, so I know exactly what they should have done in order to prevent it. So it's easy always to know how things line up. It's sort of like when I did the book on 9/11, I say the CIA and FBI could have stopped 9/11. They could have, but they would have had to know what intelligence to chase. With Oswald, he had defected to the Soviet Union. So he's not a typical guy. He's not just picking up information on everybody. In the middle of the Cold War, an ex-Marine defects to the Soviet Union. Then he decides he doesn't like it over there. Communism isn't what it was cracked up to be and all the things he read and heard. So he comes back to the United States. The FBI opens up a file on him. The CIA knows about him. And then 6 weeks before the assassination, he ends up in Mexico City after he spends the summer in New Orleans handing out leaflets in favor of a pro-Castro organization that he's formed. And nobody's in love with Cuba in the United States. Then he goes down to Mexico City to try to get a visa to travel to Cuba to join the revolution. So when he comes back into the United States only 5 weeks before the assassination, he could be on the intelligence radar for the CIA to say to the FBI, hey, you guys should really make him a priority. Put a star in his file. Make sure you keep an eye on him. Would that have prevented the assassination? I have no idea, but I know that didn't happen. It's the same problem of not sharing information that we had on 9/11. These agencies never share information with each other. So I'm not sure Shermer's absolutely right about that. It's not just like putting out a net to stop anybody from being the next school shooter.
You also have referred to something called the Special Intelligence Package, that was one of the files that you were most curious to learn about or to see what would be revealed in them. It doesn't sound like much has been revealed. And tell our audience what the Special Intelligence Package is and what you have found from that those particular documents.
Yeah, so, it was Mexican intelligence providing information about Oswald back to the CIA, and what I was hoping that we would find in the JFK files that were being released, and that file in particular, would be, and it had been redacted before, would be that Mexican intelligence, when Oswald was in Mexico City these 6 weeks before the assassination, they had somehow followed him, they had tape recorded him, they had picked up word from the Cuban embassy where they had a spy that Oswald was talking about going back to America and causing a revolution or whatever else. No, there's none of that. It's all sort of second and third hand information that they pick up that you would get in newspapers after the assassination has already taken place, passing along to the CIA material that really isn't that interesting. It's unfortunate because, you only get disappointed in life if your expectations are too high, right? So sometimes my expectations got a little ahead of where the files may actually be.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And by the way, so did a bunch more files drop today? Because
right.
The promise originally wasn't like 80,000 pages, and I know you haven't been able to get through all of it, but is that how much has actually been released, 80,000 pages, or not so much?
One of the researchers that I know is deep into the files said earlier today, maybe 4 or 5 hours ago, that he had counted 61,000 pages. So if his count is right, we're still a little short of Trump's 80,000. But with Trump, you never know. It could just feel like 80,000. Maybe it will be 80,000 by the time the last pages are out. The thing is that I think that it's a large group of documents at once, one of the largest releases ever, and so it certainly fills the expectations.
Yeah.
I just happen to think that my feeling was when Trump the other day said, "I'm releasing them tomorrow. We're going to get the 80,000 pages out." I don't know what's in there, but there'll be a lot of reading for everybody. Well, the one thing, Trump, you love Trump, you hate Trump, however you feel about him. That few people have any doubt, though, that he's a great showman, right, as a politician. I mean, he had The Apprentice before he was in politics. He knows how to lay down and tease a good, sort of next episode of a show. And I had the feeling that if there was a smoking gun in there, not only would they have told him about it, but he might have teased it in a different way. When he said the Kennedy files are going to drop tomorrow, 80,000 pages, and boy, wow,
yeah,
you better
right.
get ready. But there was none of that. And that didn't necessarily tell me that there was nothing in the files, but I would have thought that Trump would have given it more of an introduction.
Let me get to an interesting question that's come in from the audience. This is from emailer Chris. I'm reading Case Closed right now, nearly finished, have a question. In the book, Gerald does a great job of laying out why Oswald did it and that he acted alone. The conspiracy theory I am most familiar with is that the CIA was somehow involved. In the book, I don't see anything yet. I'm still reading, but that would show why it is that, because there's no actual evidence to debunk, or was his focus mainly to show why Oswald would do what he did and why he acted alone?
Yeah, no, I think he asked a great question, because I lay out the story of what I believe the credible evidence is, and I do debunk a lot of conspiracy theories along the way, but there is what's missing is the evidence of the fact that Oswald did it for the CIA. And when I say that, that doesn't say, did Oswald work for the CIA, which I don't think he did. He wasn't an employee, wasn't an asset of the CIA, and know that people go out of their way to try to say that. But even if Oswald, let's say, had been a CIA agent with a real number, he was Agent 007 or that, he then kills Kennedy. The question is, did he kill him for his own warped motivations, or he did it for the agency? And you still have to determine that. So I always have this multi-tiered process. Okay, so you want to say that Oswald killed Kennedy for the CIA, then all you have to do is show me the link to where that it becomes a credible possibility. Who in the CIA brings him in? And the key to this, by the way, Dan, and the same for the reader of Case Closed, is there's a real short window here to look at in terms of evidence, because when Oswald goes down to Mexico City on September 25th of 63, only a couple of months before the assassination, that's the day the White House announces by coincidence that Kennedy is going to be visiting Texas in November. They don't say the cities yet. They don't say the dates. So Oswald goes to Mexico City, tries to get to Havana, gets rejected, comes back 10 days later. There was no possibility for the CIA or anybody else to bring Oswald into a plot to kill the president in Dallas before they knew that the president was going to Dallas. So that means that when Oswald came back in early October, somebody has to bring him into the plot. They can't, send him a text message. They can't do it by telepathy. Somebody's got to meet with him, call him, or do something. So in that 6-week window up to the assassination, that's my challenge to all the conspiracy theorists. Just produce a piece of evidence that shows whether it was the mafia, the CIA, the FBI, the KGB, the Cubans, who reached out to Oswald to say, we want you to do this. And until that evidence is produced, then I'm saying that Oswald ends up in that window for his own warped motivations.
Real quick, before we wrap things up here, the files that have been dropped the last 2 days, are these both CIA and FBI files? Is that a whole separate can of worms? Try to, if you could clarify for us where these files are coming from.
Yeah, most of them are CIA. Most of the documents that were withheld were CIA documents, although there's a good chunk of FBI. Many of the FBI files that are coming out are about organized crime because the House Select Committee, when they investigated the assassination back in the late 70s, were suspicious about organized crime. And so the FBI provided a lot of organized crime files that end up having nothing to do with the assassination. There are also files in here on Martin Luther King, some of them, and those are still redacted. Those are coming out as FBI. There are Department of State and some Defense Department and NSA documents as well. Very, very few of those. But it's a scattering of all of what I call the alphabet bureaucracies.
A 612 guy writes, can't we have an AI bot read the 80,000 pages and give us the main and interesting points, which I think you kind of tweeted about yesterday, didn't you?
Oh, my goodness. This was my hope. I thought to myself, I've lived long enough to see the files released. Now have I lived long enough so that AI, one of these great like chat programs or Grok or, you know, Claude or whatever, could take all of these files, have it fed in, and I could feed in the files that had been released in the past and then say to it, tell me what's new in these 80,000 pages that wasn't out beforehand. I could see it right in front of me, and I could draw the conclusions about what I thought was important and what wasn't. Unfortunately, since I'm not capable of feeding it all into the AI monster, I'm getting just mediocre answers from them. But I know that that will exist in a few years. I'm very jealous of the fact that some researcher on a very complex case in the future isn't going to get, you know, sort of their eyes are tearing after a while from having stayed up half the night reading files. They'll be able to have an AI assistant do it just as well, but much faster.
Is it fair to say that you will be fairly gobsmacked if you end up, or anyone ends up finding a piece of reportage or intelligence that changes everything, the way we look at this story? As much as that, let's face it, that's human nature being what it is. That's what everybody's hoping and waiting for, some sort of clean resolution that we've never had before.
That's right. Yes. No, I absolutely will be shocked, and I'll also will change my mind. I mean, anybody who tells you that they've reached a conclusion on a historical issue and then they'll never change their mind no matter what the evidence shows is a fool. And so I would be shocked. I'll end up publishing Case Open. It'll probably sell a lot more than Case Closed, but I don't think that's going to happen. But if you show, I've always said, follow the evidence. You show me that evidence, I'll be willing to say then, okay, I was wrong. Oswald was the shooter. I'm convinced of that beyond anything, but then I'll say he did it for somebody else because that evidence now shows that. I don't think that's going to happen, but, you know, never say never.
I believe Clint Hill said that, has all along has said he believed that Oswald acted alone. That's been his position on this. You and I have talked a lot over the years about a lot of assassination stuff. I don't know if we've talked much about how much conversation, how much contact you had with the Secret Service agent who just passed away, obviously, I think at the age of 93 last month.
I had a fair amount with him at the time when I did the book, but then in recent years as well, I had an interview that I did with him at the 6th floor. I was sort of the host on that and at the 6th floor museum down in Dallas.
Yes.
He and his wife there, he was amazing. Clint Hill was the only Secret Service agent who responded that day, and, you know, correctly. He's jumping on the back of the car and at great risk to himself, hanging on to that limousine that is flying at 80 and 90 miles an hour down Stemmons Freeway to get to Parkland Hospital. He felt guilty the rest of his life that he wasn't just a few steps faster to get there beforehand, but there was, you know, he just couldn't have made it. And I will tell you that he was sort of what you think of the Secret Service as, you know, since Butler, Pennsylvania, and so much talk about, you know, the fall off maybe in Secret Service standards and it's the same as it used to be. There was no greater failure than November 22nd, 1963, but one person did stand out as a person who tried to do everything, and that was Clint Hill.
I appreciate the extended time today, man. I know you're under siege, especially today. You know how we value our friendship and with you and your willingness to continue to go on with us, and we'll stay in touch.
And Dan, I expect to be on your show first if I do a Case Open book.
I would be glad to. In fact, if you do a tour, let's do it in studio. Even better. That's what I would love.
That's a deal. I will come to studio for that.
Thanks, Gerald. Appreciate you.
All right.
That's Gerald Posner. Case Closed is the Kennedy book that he did a long time ago that I still think is a definitive book. He's written a bunch of others since then as well. kind enough to join us on a day in which he is literally getting probably 5 or 6 interview requests for each hour. We're a little behind schedule. We're going to get caught up with a mini version of the Top 5 at 5. It'll include what?
Wild Wolves and new NFL rules.